Okay, so this is going to be really different than most of my normal artistic impressions reviews. Why? Well, for a start, I really liked this one. I liked it so much that I completed it twice and have spent so much time on it. I have also got all of the game's achievements. I think there has maybe been one game before this that I really loved, and that was the Looking for Aliens games. So, let's talk about it, shall we? The game for today's video is The Gunk, which is a platforming puzzle game similar in vein to Ratchet & Clank or Tomb Raider, just without so much murder. And the story is about Rani and her friends Bex, down on their luck suppliers of energy in space. Think Alien, the original, where they're just truckers in space. That's essentially Rani and Bex. They and their little ship, the Bunny, have found this strange planet with some very interesting readings and arrived to see what they can harvest. Wait, this is actually sounding an awful lot like Alien. While they're trying to secure their royal payload, Rani gets distracted and starts to explore, inevitably finding out that this planet is not what they thought it was. Again, starting to sound an awful lot more like Alien than I thought. It's not a long game. I think I finished my first playthrough in about 5 hours max, and the story isn't something new. It has been done hundreds of times before. People arrive on a new planet, save the inhabitants, and go off into the night as saviours. But then, if we're honest, most games are repetitions of previous stories. It's just all how they're presented, right? And I've got to say that this game is really stunning, in at least its setting. Upon Rani and Bex's arrival to this small planet, the landscape is really grey and uninviting. It's uninhabited, well, or at least they believe it is, and full of a weird floating gunk that gives this game its name. Rani must use her mechanical hand, comically named Pumpkin for its orange coloration, to store up the gunk and remove it from this environment. As she moves forward and removes the gunk from the world around her, it starts to grow and blossom, even finding a beautiful creature that leads her further into this world and reveals some of the ruins of those that came before. The gunk, however, is not just an inanimate thing that does nothing. It's partially sentient, and as soon as Rani starts her assault to reveal the beautiful surroundings of this native land, it presents its own defences. Small creatures that run at Rani and try to devour her ankles like some angry Yorkie dog. A twisted eye-like creature on a stalk that spits projectile gunk, and a large bull-like being that can ram Rani or off of platforms or crush her. There are also a lot of precarious ledges, and I don't think you need to know what happens when you get knocked off them. Not to forget that some of the environmental stuff in this game is really dangerous and can cause harm to her in her self-appointed quests. You see, Bex doesn't really want Rani to do any of this. There's a bit of a story there, and I'm not going to spoil that because it is kind of heartwarming as you move through the game. I mean, it's also quite sad at times, but there I can see a lot of modern worries in this game, though that's just the environment we're living in now. There's an energy shortage, which for anyone living anywhere in the world, but predominantly in the UK and Europe right now, is a pretty big thing. Rani and Bex are both very down on their luck. And unlike Rani, Bex is more worried about how are they going to survive. If this job fails, that's it for them. And I think that's one of the reasons this game has kind of struck home so much for me. It's reflecting modern day anxiety for those of us who are slightly older and have to pay our own bills. And anyway, this part is one of the best parts of the game for me, just because their interactions is so heartfelt and sweet, in a word. The puzzles are simple. Man, they're not so basic that you don't feel accomplished while doing them, but they're not so hard that you're going to be pulling your hair out. The enemies are pretty fun, but they don't pose a huge amount of trouble after you get used to them, and even the gunk isn't really much of an issue. The story has been done so many times before, as I've said, and the characters aren't hugely original, but they are original enough to have some impact. But the best and most favourite point of this game for me is how beautiful it is. The aim of the game, as I've stated before, clear the gunk away from this planet and reveal the beauty within. And other than feeling like a cliche when I write that, this game does it really well. There is another key part of the game that comes about as you reveal more flora and fauna. You have to scan them as you raise them up from the ground. And the more of the planet's inhabitants that you scan, the more upgrades you can unlock, which you can then return to the bunny and upgrade Pumpkin to make the game even easier. Other than a couple of key upgrades for the story, you don't need to actually use them, but they are pretty fun and they do allow you to get some unique achievements, which added an extra edge to the game. Or trophies, just whichever you're playing on now, it doesn't really matter. The scanning leads into one of the only downfalls that I feel this game has, and that's the supposed free roam element section of the game. Supposedly, once you have opened up an area, you can return at any time and explore to your heart's content. I found that this wasn't quite the case. Seeing as some of the puzzles are only able of being solved once, you can't really do a lot of backtracking or forward tracking, if that's even really a thing, between points, and because of that I did miss some of the key scanning points and I wanted to have those in my inventory. It got a little bit frustrating because if you miss something that's in one of those areas and you didn't know about it, you have to go back and do the whole game all over again. And the only saving grace is that this game is not terribly long, so you can do that. But when it's right at the end of the game and you have to go back to the beginning and do it all again, it's a little bit awkward, especially when that's one of the points that they say is pretty key. You can explore and scan and find things. The fact that there are sections that you physically cannot get to, even though it says that you should be able to, I don't know, that kind of bugged me a little bit. But, yeah, you know, it's not something you're explicitly told you can do, and it only takes a little bit of the shine off this awesome game. And so there it is. It seems really silly that I can write an absolute boatload for a game that I was frustrated with, but a game I really enjoy. I just can't seem to come up with so much to talk about. The Gunk is a fun little distraction, something I think most people will enjoy, especially if you aren't into trophies and etc. and you just want a little story game to tide you over. If you have time, it could even be played in one sitting. I think you should give it a go. I think you might even like it. Though don't try and do a drawing. Really don't. I got stuck on what to do and how to do it, and I just don't think I really did it justice. Just play the game instead. I do think that would be better for everybody involved. I think the developer would thank me for that.